Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Rotoworld Football Show. It's Thursday, September 19th, a real date that is somehow possible. I have no idea how it's Thursday, September 19th, but it's week 3. We're going to break down the entire slate. That includes Ravens at Cowboys, Eagles at Saints, Falcons, Chiefs, other games. I'm scrolling through our sheet. But we are quite literally breaking down every game except for Jets, Patriots, which I'm sure was very scintillating on Thursday night. But, we're 3 weeks into the season, guys. That means trends are happening. That means death tilt is happening. That means Mel Kiper screaming about banning 2 high safeties is happening. And just, where are we at on the death of offense in the NFL? How are you guys holding up?
Well, it made a lot of people mad. And so for that, I have to give Mel Kiper a lot of credit. I mean, people were super pumped up about, pushing back on that. I'm with Mel, obviously, and he's right. And he said nothing wrong. But what I would say is it's impractical. I don't really know if there's an actual way to ban a type of coverage. I mean, what do you do? Flag 15 yards every time there are two high safeties on the field? So you can't get rid of it. That's the thing. But it has had a major effect. And I guess some people pretend to like that.
Well, Denny, we also hit on a different solution earlier this week, where I would simply just run right by the 2 high safeties, as a lot of receivers have been doing.
Speaking of running by 2 high safeties, for the podcast listeners, I'm buck-eyed up, brother. Marvin Harrison, just run by those losers, look at a safety in the eyes and say, "I'll see you in the end zone, loser," and get there. So why hasn't anyone else in the NFL except Marv, who is apparently slow, not anymore, why haven't they tried, as Pat said, running by them?
It's because they won't try blocking a pass rusher one time, which another thing people point out. Like, if you want to beat 2 high safeties, either just run the ball or pass block one time, and then you can get by the safety. Actually,
Pat, you know what's funny is we were in our Slack on Sunday, and it felt like a scoring bonanza. It was Alvin Kamara touchdown, long CD touchdown, long Jefferson touchdown, and we were losing our minds. And then everyone posts the stats at the end of the day. Oh, yeah, it was the 13th worst NFL week for scoring in NFL history. And it just happens to be that we were coming off of the worst NFL week ever. So it felt so fun last week to have so many long scores and to have the ice water thrown on my face and no, it still sucked. I was like, well, can you let me have something for once, please?
The blocking is a real thing, Pat. You mentioned a minute ago. The running the ball, this thing where people say, just run the ball.
This thing they say because it's very true.
It's not true. It's not true.
Just run it. Just easily run
it. No. Because like I said, the most successful run possible is 5 yards. Okay. So what, you want to move the ball 5 yards at a time? I think defenses are perfectly fine with that. So this whole idea, just run the dang ball, that's incorrect.
No,
that is completely wrong.
Also, all the rushing stats this year are down 2, except for quarterback runs, which is to say that offense is just bad. It's not that running the football has gotten any better or worse. It's gotten worse too. Defenses have just adapted. One thing I'd like to point out that I think may have an effect on offense's ability to move the ball is that the best offenses in the NFL universally come from one system. We have a one-party system as far as offensive creativity
goes.
goes.
Shannon uniparty. Yep.
Yeah, I know. We have one lineage that creates any amount of good football, and no one thought, what if we hired someone not from that lineage? And then someone's like Arthur Smith. I'm like, no, not that one. Let's hire from any other pool of not already established NFL guys. It's either you hire from the Shanahan system or you hire from the cocoon, and there is no second/third party, and that feels really bad for creativity of offensive minds.
Yeah, why can't Jill Stein run an offense?
I have no idea. I was gonna make a few more points about analytics and football, and that maybe just because you get one thing right doesn't mean then you should abandon 120 years of conventional wisdom of how to play NFL football, but I digress. The 2024 season's first Backs Against the Wall Bowl features the 0-2 Baltimore Ravens arriving to face the 1-1 Dallas Cowboys as somehow road favorites, Denny. While the Cowboys have gone sideways in predictable ways, they don't have anyone to throw the ball to. It's been more confusing for the Ravens. What is at the root of Lamar Jackson and company's early season struggles?
Yeah, so, last year the Ravens were pretty pass heavy on first down, which is, part of the modern NFL offensive landscape, and that's what good teams do. They're actually a few percent under their expected pass rate on first downs. And this season. And I think that might have to do with feeling kind of captive of Derrick Henry and saying, well, we signed this big like Hall of Fame running back, so we got to give him the ball. And I think that Derrick Henry should be a good thing for this offense. Should be an addition, a good addition. But so far, I feel like Derrick Henry has been very bad for the Baltimore offense.
Derrick Henry, who, quote, had one good game and then one bad game, has been very bad, the root of all evil for the Ravens offense.
He wasn't good in week 2.
He was fine. He was good. 18 carries, 84 yards. He was not part of the problem.
Oh, my God. Almost 90 yards. Oh, wow.
Well, yeah, let's get into Lamar Jackson's passing stats. He's really been carrying the old ball club.
Well, I think that's what Denny's saying, is it hasn't really done the accomplished goal. I will not go as far as saying
Derrick Henry was added to accentuate and complement. He wasn't added to be like the whole system. So he was supposed to be like a finishing touches piece.
That's
right.
What
it's highlighting.
Oh, glad that's failing miserably.
There's no touches pieces to be finished in an offense that's already like after 2 weeks, like we got Zay Flowers behind the line of scrimmage, and then like they're looking at the whiteboard, like, can someone write a second action on the board, please?
No, I agree. I mean, I think it's okay to add Derrick Henry when your offense is complete, but everyone thinks their offense is complete. And we saw like the good outcome for you add a luxury running back is the Chiefs adding Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Hold on. Derrick Henry is like categorically not been the problem for the Ravens so far. Like blaming the Ravens.
No, he just isn't adding anything to it. No, I agree. I don't think he is killing the offense. It's that he adds nothing to it. He's not peak Derrick Henry, and they can't throw deep. So
he's
what
still
do you
totally
do with
fine
that?
by the advanced metrics and like Russia.
No, yeah, he's fine, but he's just
fine.
not. He's not changing the game. He's lost that step where he cannot single-handedly dominate a game anymore.
People are not going
in 2 weeks.
People, yeah, I know, but people are not going to like this. But the Ravens' offense would be as good or better with Devin Singletary as the lead back than Derrick Henry.
I'm in. I'm totally.
I just they're basing that around. Also, I just want to mention Lamar's run super cold in the red zone. He's 2 for 10 inside the 20 for 1 touchdown through 2 games.
Is that even that unusual for him?
2 for 10. Yeah, it actually is. I mean, it's crazy bad compared to last year. So I'm thinking that is going to bounce back maybe this week.
They need, I don't know, they just don't have enough weapons because they're like oscillate. Week 1, there's like, oh, Lamar, can you run 20 times? And then he did. That's not sustainable. It's like, Lamar, can you target Isaiah Likely 11 times? He successfully did that. Of course, that's not transferable week to week. And some people blame it on Lamar, but to me, it's just like, how can you use 3 first-round picks and receivers? And Zay Flowers is the best one of them. A team that is built so well every year has just not done a good job of adding to the skill core. And maybe that's excuse-making, alibi creating for Lamar, but it's just like, once again, the skill core is not good enough for the Baltimore Ravens, and I'm sure whatever they're going to go through.
I would say that Baltimore is in the top 5 in yards created before contact for the rushers. And we know this Cowboys rush defense can be obliterated in the right game script.
So you got to know when Derrick Henry's rushing for 221 yards.
Yeah, so this is a 200+ yard game for him.
Like it was last week, and of course that didn't happen. They put 84 yards. It was a pretty mediocre performance, but
yeah, it finishes like the RB 8 or 9, probably a real bad day at the office for Derrick Henry. It was a real bad day at the office for the Cowboys last week, and Kyle, they got obliterated by the Saints. Jake Ferguson did not play in the game, so it was a one-man band on offense with CeeDee Lamb. Jake Ferguson appears like he's back for week 3. Jalen Tolbert, someone the Cowboys and dynasty managers alike have wanted for 3 years to break out. Had 6 catches for 82 yards, kind of garbage time fueled. But do you think there's anything to Jalen Tolbert's strong week 2 showing, Kyle?
Yeah, it was garbage time in that, like, apparently the 2024 NFL state of the game is that 2 quarters into playing the Saints, you're in garbage time because they're just the Death Star. But I will say, to his credit, all of his pass targets came from Dak Prescott. So it wasn't truly we have benched the starters, which is something. It's not to say that it wasn't garbage time. That game was pretty garbage. And I will say, yeah, it was a pretty bad game. I will say Brandon Cooks is continuing to look like he's about done. Like he's on that Michael Gallup trajectory of like, you're ready to be done playing.
He's on
NFL
that Derrick
football.
Henry trajectory. Am I right, folks?
In some sense, every player is on that trajectory. No one plays forever. So he is pretty far down the road, though. He's, I believe, this year at 0.9 yards per route run. this is where he was last year too. He was one of the least efficient full-time players in the NFL in terms of yards per route run, but you play in a Cowboys offense that leads the NFL in scoring. You pop up for some touchdowns. He did that in week 1 as well. But in terms of what he contributes on a play-to-play, route-to-route basis, he's one of the least efficient wide receivers in the NFL. Jalen Tolbert, nothing special, 1.4 yards per route run. But I think he has far, far, far more juice than Brandon Cooks at this point. So it wouldn't be surprising for me if he ends up taking over that true number 2 receiver role in this offense. As we saw, like I said, last year, I believe that was 8 touchdowns for Brandon Cooks, despite being dreadfully inefficient. Jalen Tolbert, not special, but probably more efficient than that. Could end up being something, but we need to get buy-in from the team that they're going to start targeting more. Last week was a step in the right direction. I believe got over 100 air yards, like you said. But I don't want to buy into it too much because it's not like I think he is going to step in and be this true breakout receiver. I'm just hoping he's better than Brandon Cooks, who appears to be on the decline.
Denny, did you fly the Zeke mission accomplished banner a little too quickly? What is the state of Zeke versus Mr. Rico Dottle after 2 weeks?
So the Zeke mission accomplished banner has been taken down from my boat, from my large boat.
Which is in your backyard, which is
your large backyard.
You have a lake,
your large deck.
which hasn't shown up yet in one of your videos.
It's a man-made lake. You're right. Anyway, the last week it was a weird backfield distribution for the Cowboys and kind of hard to decipher because it was such a blowout sideways game script. Rico Dowdle had 7 carries to 6 for Ezekiel Elliott and then 4 for Deuce Vaughn, who was active and I believe started the game or was second in line to handle carries behind Dowdle. Ezekiel Elliott ran 18 routes. He saw 3 targets. Dowdle ran 16 routes and saw 5 targets. We spent a lot of time and a lot of energy trying to decipher who's going to be the guy.
We may have, yeah.
And it was all for naught.
We knew it was all for naught too, even at the time. I mean,
none of these guys are worth the energy. I feel like you could just do better at running back at this point.
The Cowboys could also get one normal game script, but there's no way that's happening against the Ravens.
It's going to be a weird game script.
This game will be weird no matter what happens. By the way, if Derrick Henry's so bad, then why is he making money, huh?
I mean, you have a good point. It's a valid point.
That's a Twitter.
He makes more money.
He's so rich, and yet you don't like him.
He makes more money than me. That's what I'd say.
That's true. So, what's the deal with that?
He's making about 3 Caranes or something like that.
Yes. What is the deal? What is the deal, you guys, with the struggling Chicago Bears? They're arriving in Indianapolis, Indiana, to face the reeling Colts as 1-point road dogs. Kyle, there's a lot going on with both these teams. Let's start with the Bears. What, if anything, is going on that might give us hope with this offense? A subject Denny and I go very long on in the most recent Galaxy Brains.
Yeah, I mean, so the first thing I thought of when I was looking at the data, I've watched him play, obviously, but I wanted to look into the data a little more, is, okay, he's probably doing better when he's not pressured, as most quarterbacks do. And while that's technically true, he's averaging 4.7 yards per attempt with no big-time throws and a PFF passing grade that ranks 27th in the NFL from a clean pocket. He does not look good even when not pressured. I will say, per the eye test, he does really incredible things before throwing a bad pass.
That's really funny. And it's true.
The jersey rip play where he evades pressure.
Surely he's going to do something cool now.
I know. You were like, this is the moment. You felt like you had it in the tips of your fingers. This is the magical play that ascends Caleb Williams from a rough week 1 to a truly special week 2 an NFL career. And just a horrific interception on the jersey tear play is the one I'm referring to. Pat, as you said, you watched his first game. That was one of the games you blurbed, I believe. He looks like he has the physical tools, and that's kind of what I'm describing. But just when he sits back in the pocket and throws, it hasn't happened yet. It's also 2 games. I don't want to panic, but we also have a long storied history of rookie quarterbacks struggling both as fantasy assets and as propping up their pass catchers. So it does feel kind of bleak, if I'm being honest.
Well, I think the clean pocket mistakes are just a function of the overall horrible environment that has been created by Shane Waldron. Again, we're excuse making, blah, 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 blah. But anyone who watches these games like, oh, man, these routes look pretty complicated and like way too long developing for a guy who's facing instant pressure. And one of the reasons he's facing instant pressure is because defenses don't respect him. He hasn't given them a reason to respect him yet. But Bears seem like they really need to go back to the drawing board. As I joked on Galaxy Brains, maybe have like one extra tight end on the field occasionally, like do something to help this?
Well, that would mean getting Cole Kmet involved, and they simply won't do any of that.
They will not. They will not. Curious.
Yeah, the Saints are sending out like 2-man routes consistently. Maybe the Bears look into that. Also, I think a healthy Keenan Allen would make a difference here. I don't know how much of a difference, but I think I think things would get better with him in the offense.
Well, guess what's not happening? Keenan.
I was going to say we'll never know.
No, yeah, we'll never know.
Never know.
Denny, so far we have seen the promise and the peril with Mr. Anthony Richardson fantasy. Kyle, who said, this guy, he's the guy you got. This is the guy you got. He's the next LT. He's the next Priest Holmes, Anthony Richardson, the total week 2 stink bomb. Denny, which one do you think is closer to the real Anthony Richardson for 2024 fantasy managers?
Well, I think both week 1 and week 2 are the real Anthony Richardson because he has such a extremely high variance fantasy profile as an extreme downfield thrower who doesn't rush a lot, but is also involved in the red zone rushing attack. I have some numbers here to support that. First of all, this is a low volume offense. And part of the reason is because they hit some big plays in week 1 against Houston, but they have 101 offensive snaps through 2 weeks. That's the lowest in the league. Richardson is only rushing on 15% of his dropbacks so far. Just for context, Jaden Daniels has rushed on 36% of his dropbacks. So it's not even in the same neighborhood there. And then the intermediate stuff has been horrific, especially in week 2. Between 10 and 19 yards, Richardson this year is 7 for 17. Okay, and there are some big plays mixed in there, but 7 for 17, not so good. I don't know. I feel like on the weeks where he hits Alec Pierce or AD Mitchell or someone streaking down the sideline and he gets a rushing touchdown, that's going to be cool. You're going to 25, 30 fantasy points. It's going to be fun. There are going to be a lot of not fun weeks, though, mixed in.
Kyle, real quick on Anthony Richardson. The Bears defense is off to a pretty strong start. They contained CJ Stroud even in week 2. I just bid aside all that. I didn't really know where to rank Anthony Richardson. I think I ranked him as the QB 12, definitely on the low end. Do you think that's just too underselling? Is that too low? What do you think is actually the right spot right now for Anthony Richardson?
It's funny because QB 12, I think it's a little low, but on average, it's probably not that far off. But as Denny said, every week is the QB 3 or the QB 19. Yes. So QB 12 is never going to seem like the right ranking in hindsight. But to be fair, I actually do think it's a little low for him given his rushing potential and his ceiling. And that's kind of what we're chasing at this point, given the state of offenses aren't putting up points. There's one guy who on a single play can put up 50 passing yards or rush for a long touchdown. I'm probably still ranking more in that 7-8 range, but that's not that far from what you said. And I just think, as Denny pointed out, I victory lapped Anthony Richardson last week, but Denny's right that his entire game revolves around rushing for a touchdown, which, albeit common for rushing quarterbacks, is not going to happen every week, or throwing for if not multiple 50-yard touchdowns, which is going to be very rare, even for the strongest arm quarterback. So I think Denny is right to a degree that while the season-long finish is almost certainly a QB1 finish barring health, it's going to be a sort of bumpy and arguably painful road to get there.
By the way, Anthony Richardson watching the Mel Kiper clip and screaming for more 2 high safeties.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Why don't these other guys just throw beyond the 2 high safeties like I did in week 1? Real quick, any thoughts on DeAndre Swift off to maybe the biggest victim so far of the Bears' offensive struggles? Is he even still in the top 24? What is your gut feel on DeAndre Swift, Denny?
No, he's not in the top 24. I will say that he is going to – I was forced by the U.S. government to include him in my funnel defense report. It's coming out Friday because the Colts are the most extreme run funnel in memory. Okay.
Well, are they, or is that because of one quarter, Denny?
It's not.
The Packers.
No. The Texans leaned super hard on the run.
Joe Mixon,
in neutral game script, and they're bad, and they're without DeForest Buckner and maybe 2 other starting defenders. So if DeAndre Swift is ever going to get there, it's going to be this week. That's all I'll say about it.
It won't be. Got it. Colts have, I think, literally given up back-to-back 150-yard rushers, and I still don't think DeAndre Swift can get there.
He should retire if he does not. The Houston Texans, Minnesota Vikings meet up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Again, I can never remember if it's Minneapolis or St. Paul. Sorry to the Minnesota heads out there. Both teams are 2-0. The Texans are 2.5-point roughly road favorites. Denny Carter, Houston is meeting expectations, sort of. They weren't very explosive in week 2. Minnesota's overachieving. Are we witnessing your guy, Sam Darnold, the best case scenario with the former Jets cast off?
Yeah, I mean, so far, this is a Kevin O'Connell offense down to its core. The Vikings are 4% over their expected dropback rate. I'm sorry, they were 4% over in week 1. They were 2% over in week 2 against the Niners. They're staying on schedule. A lot of success on early downs. Their defense has been, putting quarterbacks in a blender, which I think they actually can do to Stroud as well, yes. To an extent. So this is a good environment for Sam Darnold. Now, I will say Sam Darnold has thrown into the largest windows in the league so far, okay, per next gen stats. But he's also thrown a lot of near picks. So in a negative game script, I fear for my boy Sammy. I don't think that it'll be super negative here. I think it'll be a relatively close game.
Wasn't a very pretty tight window on that 97-yard touchdown to Justin Jefferson. I've seen all I need to see. Sam Darnold is back.
I've seen enough. Sam Darnold's good, obviously. But I think you're starting him. What do you have him ranked this week, Pat? Like
QB 15 or 16.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. But I think that he feels very safe in this offense right now.
He feels very safe. This feels like a game that should be a shootout. But I think we're kind of learning already. It just isn't going to be a shootout in 2024. Two defenses playing really, really well. Kyle, is it fair to say our summer fears with Tank Dell were founded? Or is it 2 games, a pretty good Bears defense in week 2? Steph Diggs isn't really breaking out yet either. Nico Collins very much is. Where's the panic meter at on Tank Dell right now?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the summer fears were that we hadn't seen this offense play a ton of 11 personnel, and that was going to lead to Tank Dell, who's probably reasonably leaving the field when they move out of 11 personnel, just not getting enough routes. That really hasn't been the case. He has 1 fewer target and 1 fewer route and over twice as many air yards as Stephon Diggs. He's out there essentially running all the routes, seeing plenty of air yards, seeing enough targets. I don't think, there was like the tweets about, here's the target share when him and Nico Collins are on the field. You can throw those out. Nico Collins is a certified alpha wide receiver, but can Tank Dell be this team's number 2? So far, the split between him and Stephon Diggs indicates, it's a 2A, 2B situation, but it's a good passing attack. So I would say those fears not really based in any truth in what's happened so far. The fear should have been that Nico Collins, who had an incredible, once every year level yards per route run, dominating the targets and looking like a true star receiver, he's going to continue that trajectory and be really good. And that seems to be what is happening. So I think you've got 2 really strong number 2 receivers competing for targets in a given week. And it is going to make Tank Dell extremely boom bust. But the fact that he's running all the routes and still being targeted makes me think we're getting a boom week coming. So I see him as, I said it last week too. So, we'll see if it bites me again. It might. I still see him as a clear buy low.
Let's just say, by the way, when I spent 15 straight months insinuating Nico Collins might not actually be good, that was a bit. That was a joke.
It was very funny.
I believed in Nico Collins the entire time. It's definitely a bit.
By the way, Stephon Diggs, 5.5 ADOT, average depth of target through 2 games. Vikings play all the 2 highs, so could be a scam situation for Diggs.
Denny, was it a bit when you told me earlier this week that the Vikings backfield's kind of veering towards a committee, or was it just a one good week for Ty Chandler? It wasn't garbage time game script or anything like that. Ty Chandler was much more involved in week 2, but Aaron Jones still playing a lot of snaps. What's going on in the Vikings backfield?
So Jones, he fumbled at the goal line last week. Otherwise, he would have had a monster fantasy day. He may have been dinged up. We're not sure.
He hadn't committed the most catastrophic mistake you can make. He would have had a huge.
Denny, to your point on him being dinged up, I believe he was limited in Wednesday's practice with a hip injury. Zero indication that he wouldn't play this week. But when you talk about an aging veteran receiver who I think was cut from his previous team primarily because of his lack of availability, he was still a great home run hitter in his final moments with the Packers, and I think they kind of just got fed up with him not always being available. Instantly dinged up with the Vikings puts a little bit of red flag on things for me. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and so Ty Chandler got a lot of run last week. I mean, this rush game for the Vikings is really good, way better than last year. Imagine that with Alexander Madison and who else as your
Ty Chandler, who you're now saying is good.
No. It was someone else.
Ty Chandler is good, by the way.
He is good. Yeah. So the Vikings already have 10 runs of more than 10 yards this season. In 2023, the Vikings had 11 runs total of over 10 yards. So it's really, really good stuff. It's good for Darnold. Jones has 23 rushes to 18 for Ty Chandler on the season. The routes are 30 to 18 in favor of Jones. Jones is being targeted on 28% of his routes, which kind of suggests that he's like they game plan for that sort of thing. I think Aaron Jones kind of shockingly useful right now. But
his snap share. Yeah, sorry, Denny.
Ty Chandler could be a deep flex. Yeah,
it was a weird thing with Ty Chandler and those touches last week, where Aaron Jones' snap share actually went up. But to Kyle's point, to your point, I think the Vikings definitely think like the best use of Aaron Jones is to make him part of a committee and not have him play so much where he's injuring his hamstring, all that, blah, blah, blah. So I do not think the Ty Chandler involvement was an aberration. By the way, Joe Mixon not practicing Thursday, or at least Wednesday, not practicing so far. It could be Cam Akers.
I believe Thursday as well. And to your point, Dameon Pierce also not practicing, didn't play last week either. And we saw in the preseason, Dameon Pierce, and we saw last year as well, just doesn't seem like a good fit for this scheme. Whereas Cam Akers during the preseason, admitted it's preseason, let's not read too much into it, he looked like the perfect fit for this scheme.
He was hitting the spin move button.
Oh, buddy, he was just mashing. I think it's O. Is that the one that's on the right? Because I feel like that's the spin move button. I haven't played a football game in a while. He was mashing that button. It was working. He looked like a good fit in this offense, let alone the fact that you don't need to be that good of a fit if you just see every single touch and CJ Stroud's your quarterback.
And Kyle, curious that you mentioned football video games, and you still have not congratulated me on winning the national title in my online dynasty in college football.
Who'd you beat in the title game?
I beat Notre Dame with the University of Tennessee.
Sounds pretty fraudulent, but sure.
Rocky Top. I was fraudulent. I chose them because they have a young, fast quarterback. It's the only reason I was Tennessee. The mysterious Eagles. Denny, I make it sound like the Eagles are visiting a derelict space station. Visit the suddenly unstoppable Saints as 2.5-point road dogs. We talked and written a lot about the reasons behind the Saints' stunning start, Denny. But for now, let's focus on the Eagles' struggles. Is it fair to say this team still does not have an offensive identity? What is going on here? A.J. Brown missing a second straight game in week 3.
I think the identity now without A.J. Brown is just for Jalen Hurts to play more hero ball. We saw him rush a lot. Jalen Hurts has played Dennis Allen's defense twice in his career. And both times, guys, he had 18 rushing attempts. Wow. So we're going to see north of 10 rushing attempts definitely for Hurts in this game, barring some sort of weird game script, of course, which with the Saints, I guess you never know.
The Saints, 35-3 at halftime again.
Greatest team of all time, apparently. But yeah. So I think that's the offense is him running, force feeding Saquon Barkley at every opportunity. They're really run heavy in most parts of the game, most game scripts. And then Devontae Smith is just a target magnet without A.J. Brown in the game. So I think that you basically know what's coming. We'll talk about Dallas Goedert in a second. But it's a little bit bleak, I would say. I feel like this team still doesn't really know what it is.
Denny, let's just segue into Dallas Goedert then instead of going to Kyle. We'll go to Kyle in just a second. But Dallas Goedert, unimpressive week 1, unimpressive end to last season. He was falling in a lot of drafts. I stopped the slide several times or whatever. Like, he's a low end tight end 1 at this point, but he's like a free tight end 1. It's not been a free tight end 1 through 2 weeks, even with A.J. Brown out in week 2. Is it looking over for Dallas Goedert in fantasy?
It's overish. So 4.6 average depth of target through 2 games for Dallas Goedert. It's just way, way below his usual usage. Kellen Moore's offense does not include a whole lot of Dallas Goedert in the slot. That slot usage has gone way down. He's being targeted on 12% of his routes. That's down from 20% last season. So I don't know. I feel like you should be able to do better at tight end, but if it's a 12 or 14 team league, maybe you can't. I don't know.
Here's a good one: Hunter Henry or Dallas Goedert.
I mean, I would pretty easily lean Henry. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I'm giving Goddard. No, I'm giving Goddard one more go.
Wow,
right?
you're such a
Grant Calcaterra's not catching 3 passes again.
Why are you such a?
Oh yeah, the guy first time in 5 years goes 100 yards. I got to jam that
on.
guy back in my lineup.
It's all
a short week against the Jets. Yeah,
it's all aligned for.
Well, whenever you can lose 6 targets to Britton Covey, that's really how you want to be.
Britton Covey.
That's a Jahan Dotson tweet. That is not a Dallas Goddard tweet.
Britton Covey's
It was Dallas Goddard tweet last week.
No.
6 targets on 17 routes. You're not hearing this. I'm just saying he's interesting.
I am not hearing them. By the way, Dallas Goddard, come on. With all these weapons, healthy, with AJ Brown. Oh yeah, that's right. AJ Brown didn't play in week 2. It's never been more.
Yeah. What happened? All my teams are dead.
My team. This is not a bit. My teams are not dead because I didn't go true 0 RB this year, and my running backs are just like coming into my office like we got another crate of gold. Like gold coins spilling out of my office floor. Like, I don't know, Ramondre Stevenson just brought a whole nother treasure chest of gold into my office.
I actually see in the background of your video, I saw the bank examiner scrubbing your floor.
He was the bank examiner is down horrific.
We can talk about this later, but I mostly did go full 0 RB, and I'm hanging off the cliff, and Brian freaking Robinson throws his hand down there, and he's like, "Buddy, let's get you back up."
Samuel L. Jackson's dangling you off a cliff right now.
But Brian Robinson will not let me fall.
Thank you, Brian.
Really, really good. Tell you who's letting everyone fall, regardless of your team build, Kyle, is Chris Olave. The Saints, 91 points in 2 weeks, the 4th most in NFL history, 2nd most of the century. Chris Olave can't be a part of it for some reason. What is going on here? He's going to start cooking, right?
I think so. I'm pretty sure he's going to start cooking. Last week,
take off your Buckeyes jersey and say that.
Buddy, go Buckeyes. Producer Adam, who do we play this week? Because I don't actually care that much. I don't know. We didn't play last week, I don't think, so I don't really care. I mean, Michigan's terrible, so who cares? Let's just
play another fraudulent Big Ten team. We can move on.
They're all fraudulent, so
I love the Big
doesn't
Ten.
even matter. Chris Olave last week, 46% target share, literally half of the team's air yards. PFF's #1 graded receiver. It was his highest PFF receiving grade in his history as an NFL player. He goes 4 for 81.
That says more about PFF than Olave, man. Come on, man. Your highest grade ever. You catch 3 passes. Give me a friggin'.
No, I think he got 4. I think he goes 4 for 81.
Good God, man. I love PFF, but good God, man.
I mean, oh my God. Producer Adam says Ohio State's a 40-point favorite at home versus Marshall. Get ready to learn 36 points. So
sorry. Chris Olave, we're good, though.
No, I mean, he graded well in PFF.
Swear to God that we're good.
He'll be fine.
He's running all the routes.
He's sorry. He already all he does is disappoint. It's like Amari Cooper 2.0.
Rashid Shaheed's getting away with it every week. It's not gonna. Rashid Shaheed's gonna drop in fantasy,
and then they throw to him. That's what he does.
If you want to bet me, every single week from here to the end of the season, Rashid Shaheed scores a 50-yard touchdown, taking all of those yards, catches, and the touchdown off of the field from Chris Olave, I will take that bet against you. I think Rashid Shaheed is very good. Do I think he will continue to get away with it, as Denny pointed out, every single week, which he is 2 for 2 right now? I do not think he'll get away with it that often. I think Chris Olave, who is dominating the targets, dominating the routes, dominating the air yards on an offense that is the 4th best offense through 2 weeks, he has to be better in terms of fantasy production. I think he is still a good player. He will get better in terms of fantasy production. Pat, as you said before the season, he may just be Amari Cooper. He may not be a superstar, but he's not even producing like Amari Cooper right now, although his peripherals kind of look at least that good.
Yeah, I love the Amari Cooper comparison for Olave because he's objectively a good player that we just put such sky high expectations on.
Totally.
And we're not fine with him just being really good.
Yep.
And making Pro Bowls. We want him to be an all pro. So Chris Olave Rashid Shaheed, is getting away with it. That means someone else on the Saints is not getting away with it, Kyle. Tell us about Taysom Hill and the bank examiner, of course. The bank examiner's drained Denny's artificial lake in his backyard, getting ready to fill it in with a parking lot, maybe franchising a Chipotle in Denny's backyard. What is happening with Taysom Hill through 2 games?
He's just running fewer routes. To be fair, the Saints offense runs 20 pass plays a game because 4 of those are long touchdowns, and then they just get to put in their backups. Apparently, that's just the Saints script through 2 weeks. But through 2 weeks, he is running fewer routes, seeing fewer targets. It's 14 routes per game last year and 2.5 targets. This year, it's 6.5 routes and 1.5 targets. And although he is like playing a de facto backup running back role, with how much Alvin Kamara is seeing the ball, the RB2 role doesn't really amount to much. But then when they go to the backups in the fourth quarter, Jamal Williams takes over that grinder, let's kill clock, like truly this game is over role. So he's been in a weird spot for 2 weeks, though I do think he's in a weird spot in terms of his usage, in which he is a somewhat part-time route runner, but also a backup running back to a like Christian McCaffrey levels of usage. Alvin Kamara makes it difficult for him to just see enough touches to get there, albeit his role is in theory intriguing. In practice, it just hasn't worked out that way. And I think it's kind of hard to expect that, especially now he's dealing with, I believe, a chest injury. It looks like he's going to play, but did they really try and scheme him up more touches now that he's banged up? As Pat, you pointed out, a 34-year-old, physically playing.
Every touch they give him is like, hey, man, go run into 4 people.
It is. Like you saw in the preseason, they were like, you know how these games don't matter? You're a fullback. Dive into 10 defenders. So maybe that's not the best idea for a third. I think he's like 34, a 34.
He is 30. He's always older than you think, Taysom Hill, when you go to his Pro Football Reference. But Denny, the bank examiner, he promised us me one of those more tasteful Chipotles. He's not putting in a drive-through, at least not till they condemn your house.
That's nice.
And can knock it down. For now, just be a walk-in Chipotle.
I would like to stop digging holes in my backyard for no reason, though, as part of my debt.
Why does he need so much dirt? What is he doing with this dirt? I don't know what he is doing with this dirt. All right. Excuse me. The Giants and Browns are possibly the 2 most boring teams in the league. They're facing off in Cleveland, the shores of Lake Erie, with the Browns getting 6 points at home. Kyle Dvorchak. What is the state of this fantasy unfriendly Browns offense, including the aforementioned struggling Amari Cooper?
Deshaun Watson seems pretty bad at football. That doesn't seem good. Because they're doing things that, as we saw last year when Joe Flacco took over, they continued to play fast, pass a lot, and because their defense is really good, they just get the privilege of running a lot of plays. I believe right now Deshaun Watson leads the NFL in dropbacks among all quarterbacks. Doesn't matter because he is just not efficient. I will say I don't want to say to his credit, but at least to make excuses for these 2 games. He, I believe, has 90 passing yards and a likely touchdown lost on drops alone. He's been playing with mostly backup tackles. He's getting at least one of his tackles, if not both. Jack Conklin looks like he's going to play. Jedrick Wills, I don't actually know if he's going to play. He was limited. They've had a lot of guys who are limited and don't end up playing, but I think they're getting improvements along the offensive line. There is no way they continue to drop nearly 50 yards a game in terms of passes. I don't really think that excuses a ton of why Deshaun Watson has played bad. I think just like we saw last year, if Jameis Winston never takes over, this offense would be electric. Watson, I don't think Watson is as bad as his previous 2 games have been because, like I said, the offensive line, the drops. But do I think he is a top 25 NFL quarterback? No, I still don't think he's that caliber of player at this point. So the thing you have to lean back on is they play in a way that should lead to points, and they don't have the quarterback right now to do that.
Gardner Minshew would make this offense hum.
Mm-hmm. He's making the Raiders hum. We'll talk about that a little later. Denny, the Browns, they're playing. It takes 2 to tango when the total is 38.5. As the New York Giants. What is the state of the Giants? Does this profile as a Wan'Dale Robinson week against the Browns defensive front, where the Giants might have to get the ball out quickly?
So, look, the Browns play too high at the second lowest rate in the league, so lots and lots of man coverage. I think it's another Malik Neighbors, big target week. Whether he can turn those targets into yards like he did last week against a horrible Washington secondary is another question entirely. But maybe you get a contribution from Darius Slayton or Wan'Dale Robinson. I do think it'll be pass heavy. The Browns look like a pass funnel right now. The Giants are 6-point dogs, so could see a lot of dropbacks. I mean, I think the Browns defense will eat Daniel Jones alive, and none of this will matter. But we'll see.
Myles Garrett didn't practice Wednesday. I'm not really sure how serious it is, though.
He was banged up last week, I believe, with a toe issue as well. He ends up playing through the toe issue. I'm assuming it was a DNP Wednesday to kind of maintenance, veteran maintenance for that toe issue. So I assume he's playing, but I guess worth watching for sure.
Yeah, a wide receiver injures their heel or calf one time and never plays again. Defensive players suffer 14 different injuries, and I don't even ever consider the
Kyle Van Noy fractured his orbital bone, which is I believe the bone that goes right below your eyeball. He practiced once in a limited capacity. He was like, "I'm back, boys."
And we will be right back after this. The defending Super Bowl champions are back in prime time this weekend as Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs hit the road for a battle with the Falcons in Atlanta. Coverage of the matchup begins Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock. I hit the wrong inflection on Peacock.
I kind of noticed that. I can feel it.
I promise to do better on the next promo read. I pride myself in my voice inflections. It's actually not a joke. The still boring Kansas City Chiefs arrive in Atlanta as 3.5-point favorites against a Falcons squad that just pulled off a gut check win in Philadelphia. Kyle, is Denny right that the Chiefs are now forever doomed to being a boring offense? Please say no. Please say no.
I think he's a little more right than I'd like to think. The thing is, as we pointed out during the summer, while they have made plenty of effort to add speed and deep ball ability to their offense, it worked not having any of that last year, and you'll never believe it. It's working again. Not only in the win-loss column, which is one way to measure it, it's a pretty rudimentary way to measure it, but Mahomes is 5th in yards per attempt on throws behind the line of scrimmage. He's 6th in yards per attempt on throws shorter than 10 yards downfield. He's 11th in EPA per drop back on the whole, which isn't special, but it's a little bit better, I think, than he was last year. They're at the point in this dynasty where they don't need him to be a superhero, and they literally proved that directly into our eyeballs last year by winning a Super Bowl. Do I think he will have as a league? As I say this, I honestly don't even know it's true. Do I think he'll have a league bottom ADOT? No, but maybe. Honestly, no, but maybe.
Chiefs never even play well, and they win every. They don't play well at all against the Bengals, and still just easily win.
Mm-hmm. Without. I know we're going to get into the running back situation, but the checkdowns will continue until morale improves, because without Pacheco, the run game will become the short passing game will become an extension of the run game or a replacement for the run game. This is the only avenue I see for Travis Kelce being a thing this year, honestly.
Travis Kelce and Kyle, let's talk about the Chiefs backfield now, because I think Denny is absolutely right. I don't think we're getting a true backfield in Isaiah Pacheco's absence, and Samaje Perine is going to be more involved. Carson Steele, we don't entirely know how they're going to use him. Obviously, he's going to be more involved. Kareem Hunt, probably not as much this week. Just what are we expecting without the bell cow, Isaiah Pacheco, in week 3?
Yeah, they called up, signed to the active roster, Keontae Ingram from the practice squad, and then signed Kareem Hunt to the practice squad. And then Andy Reid was like, maybe Kareem Hunt will play this week, or maybe the next week, maybe the week after that. So honestly, I think he's probably not in football shape right now. Hasn't played football in probably 10 months or something like that. I don't know. So
it was super washed the last time he did, by the
way. That is absolutely correct. I didn't want to go fully in on the guy, but wasn't even that good last year, frankly. So I'm not sure when we see him. I think that's the best possible outcome for someone like Carson Steele and Samaje Perine, who, albeit, we said Kareem Hunt is washed, he knows the system and has a history of production. If he's not in there, I don't think Keontae Ingram's seeing more than a few snaps, probably coming up for more special team snaps on average than he is for offensive snaps. Carson Steele, albeit looks very fullbacky, wears 40, is a large man who runs a 4.75, I believe. I don't know if that's even true, honestly, especially I believe it's a pro day number. He was a combine snub. So
a pro day number, that means it was actually a 4.9.
Actually, you're right, though. He's a 4.8. He's a 4.8 guy. So, but point being, they have almost exclusively deployed him as a running back, both on his limited snaps during the regular season and primarily in the preseason as well. And what other choice do they have other than playing Samaje Perine out there? I think if they wanted to use Samaje Perine more, they either would have or they could have traded for him. He was a convenience pickup as a veteran to add to the roster, whereas Steele made the roster as a UDFA. So I do think he will see roughly half of the between the tackles carries, if not a little more. But what does that mean on the Chiefs version of this offense is the more confounding point. They just aren't that great of an offense because they don't need to be, as I pointed out.
Hold on. They're very great at what they do, which is playing boring offense and winning every game.
Yeah, they just don't score a ton of points. I think they were 14th in the NFL in points last year. Yeah, I mean, they get the job done. I'm not going to, and we see in the playoffs, like their regular season is not indicative of who they are as a team and as a talent. But are you taking them as a top 5 scoring offense from here to the end of the season? I think the answer is no.
No.
I do worry about everything you said about Carson Steele makes a ton of sense. I just worry a lot about 4-yard Samaje Perine receptions functioning as a run. We'll see what happens. We'll watch Sunday night on NBC and Peacock. Denny, that includes was Monday night on our rivals ESPN. I don't even watch it. Was that a Falcons revival for Kirk Cousins, or just a really, really lucky win against a hellaciously bad defense that essentially just gave up at the end of the game?
Lucky for sure. You know, the safeties were so high. It was unbelievable for the Eagles. But I mean, I mentioned on Tuesday's show, just to reiterate, Cousins' average depth of target went from 7 in week 1 to 8.2 in week 2. His air yards jumped up by 2 yards per attempt. That's pretty significant. Just remember, going into this game, that the Falcons are and want to be very run heavy. They were 5% under their expected drop back rate in week 1, 8% under in week 2. They're really run heavy on first down. So they want to establish it here with Bijan and with Tyler Algier. If you think this game's going to be close, I think Algier sort of kind of interesting, maybe in 14-team leagues. But obviously, look, I am not kidding. It's not a bit. Ray McLeod is out there on basically every route. So, he's going to be a thing. It just depends on how pass heavy the Falcons have to be here.
Could not agree more. Denny was right about Mr. Ray McLeod. The Titans and Packers have the feel of two teams holding serve until their real season, quote unquote, can begin. That's even more true with the Packers and the Titans, Denny, because we just don't know when Jordan Love's going to be back. It could be this week. Probably not, though. What did you see without Jordan Love last week, and what can we expect if Malik Willis is back under center this Sunday?
Yeah, so here's a stat for you. The Malik Willis-led Packers offense last week had a 9% neutral pass rate against the Colts.
When you said 9, I was sure it was 9% below expected, because that's a really large number below expected. And you said 9%. Less than 1 out of 10 plays they ran was a pass attempt, correct?
That's in neutral script, yep. And that generated 53 rushing attempts total, 32 for Josh Jacobs. So we know what's going to happen. Now, I will say, I don't think that the Packers can get away with that against the Titans the way that they did against the Colts. The Colts are uniquely awful against the run, and I think Matt LaFleur knew that. So I don't think we're just going to see 50-plus rushing attempts. I don't think Jacobs is in for 30-plus rushing attempts. But this is going to be a quick game. It's going to be an ugly game, low-scoring game. I do think Malik Willis could be a little more exposed here, though.
The total is crept up by 1 point to 37.5, which maybe means people are starting to get suspicious. Jordan Love will come back, but
that would be my interpretation of it. Yeah,
I still think it's a fake out. Every report is like, no, man, it's going to be week 5, and the Packers just seem intent on the head fake. I do think it's going to be another week without Jordan Love, but he actually could return. What is the state of?
Sorry, you can't play Christian Watson. Just want to say it.
You absolutely cannot. Kyle, what is the state of the Titans? The backfield split. Tyjae Spears looks like he's going to play through his ankle injury. DeAndre Hopkins still really struggling because Will Levis is still really struggling, and DeAndre Hopkins is hurt. What are we telling people about the Titans?
Yeah, this was I was blurbing on Wednesday. This is a classic. Oh, no, Tyjae Spears not practicing. Let's get that blurb up. And he tells reporters, as soon as I hit the word publish in our content management system, he just tells reporters straight up he is playing. And that jives with what Ian Rappaport said. He basically just said, like, quote, tweeted a video of him and said, like, he should be okay, essentially. And we saw Brian Callahan going into last week, and he has said it again this week, talking about getting Tyjae Spears more involved, making it more of a true committee. And then through 3/4 of last week, he was out-carried, but this is a closer split, frankly. He was out-carried by Tony Pollard 13-7, out-targeted 4-2, which makes him a clear backup. But in week 1, he just looked like he was hardly involved at all. He was a snap eater. He was out there for snaps, but he didn't get the ball almost at all. In week 2, he looked like a guy who is a true change of pace back, a guy you get out there on passing downs, but also when you need to give your starting running back a breather. If that's the split we end up seeing, and I kind of think it is what we're going to see, he's a viable fantasy running back. As someone who went a lot of 0 RB, He's an RB too. For someone who didn't go as much zero RB, he's more of that desperation flex play. But I do think he's back on the menu. After week 1, I would have just said you really can't play him. In terms of DeAndre Hopkins, I just don't think he's fully healthy yet. He only ran a route on just shy of a quarter of the team's dropbacks in week 1. That jumped to 51% in week 2, but that's backup numbers. So we have to see him get up to a full route rate. We have to see him look like DeAndre Hopkins, which he hasn't done yet either. So I don't think you're close to playing him.
Kyle went even zero RB than Denny. And the bank examiner is not just using a shovel to dig holes in Kyle's back. He's using one of those things they use to put in telephone poles, power lines.
Yes.
There's just a lot of displaced dirt in Kyle's backyard right now. So very, very disturbing. The Lions and Cardinals square off, accompanied by the week's highest total of 52.5 the last time I checked. It's not too often we've heard those words, Denny, highest total associated with the Bucs or the Lions. Do the Lions still deserve such lofty respect, or is this offense taking on water after back-to-back under expectations performances to begin the year?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Lions got into a position last week that they desperately want to avoid, which is that they had to lean on Jared Goff, and Jared Goff
behind 1 point, it's over.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of does sometimes feel that way for Detroit, where they just can't afford to get behind. I will say that it was even worse than you think because Jared Goff, it's not like last week the Bucs heated him up with a bunch of pressures and blitzes. They didn't, and he was still bad. And that's usually the Goff story is that you pressure him and he falls apart. He was not pressured and he fell apart. So I feel like it's just a huge red flag for this offense. But this game should be high scoring. I really like Jameson Williams in this game because the Cardinals don't play a ton of too high, so he can actually get away with it downfield. I will say that the Cardinals' rush defense is quietly pretty bad per the metrics. So you're starting both Detroit running backs here. Jameson Williams is running cold. I'm sorry, I'm not Jameson. Jahmyr Gibbs is running cold. Should bounce back soon.
JMO, by the way, has a wide receiver 1 profile. It feels weird putting him in the wide receiver 2 ranks. His profile is that of a wide receiver 1. It'll be very, very interesting to see where this goes. Speaking of wide receiver 1s, Kyle, Marvin Harrison Jr., not slow, apparently. Great week. Should I say great quarter? He had no catches after the first quarter. So Kyle's like, you can be good, but you can be good, but not that good. I'm not going to throw you the ball after the first quarter. How excited are we after the really great game, but kind of weird where he doesn't catch a ball after the first quarter?
Yeah, I mean, when you send your opponents packing after 1 quarter, it's kind of hard to catch any more passes after that when you mercy rule them in 15 minutes.
Good point. That's the Buckeye and Kyle. He's used to that, playing in a fraudulent conference. Indiana not competitive after the first quarter. That's what Marvin is.
I will say, although he did not catch a pass after the first quarter, he was targeted after the first quarter. He ended the game with nearly 40% of Kyler's pass attempts going his way. It was 70% of the team's air yards. And as you pointed out, not slow, got up to 20 miles per hour on his second of 2 touchdown catches. I mean, not that, I couldn't have told you this, but he's not slow. He's dominating the targets. I do think we'll see a Trey McBride resurgence for what it's worth. Trey McBride seeing also a ton of targets and just hasn't hit on that monster tight end premium, 8 catches, 98 yards and a touchdown kind of game. We are getting that from Trey McBride at some point, but I do think this was a return to what will end up looking like normal in hindsight, where they have 2 kind of clear number 1 pass catchers, 1A, 1B in Kyler and McBride, in Marv and McBride. And then Dortch will pop up every now and then. But I mean, Marv's not slow. He's an elite prospect. He's a great athlete. I think we should not 2 touchdowns in 1 quarter, but expect him to dominate the opportunities going forward.
We'll say it's always a little weird with Cardinals pass catchers. I think kind of because of Kyler's inconsistency as a passer. It'd be really nice for Kyler to finally put it all together as a passer this year. A ready and rested Bills team host an end crisis. Jaguars squad is surprisingly modest. 5-point home favorites. Seriously, they should be like 8 or 9-point favorites. I don't get this line at all, Kyle. Just lay it on us. How grim are things for this Jags offense? Trevor Lawrence, I think, has under 30 completions through 2 games.
I'll say, as far as the talent of the offense goes, Trevor's been fine. He's 14th in EPA per play. He's 11th in PFF passing grade.
Wow.
It's I think he's kind of the exact same
player.
Computer's
really struggling to begin the year, man. The computers are struggling.
I mean, it's kind of the same player he was last year and the year before. He's fine. I honestly, this kind of confirms what we talked about in the offseason when you were like, he's a CFL player. I'm like, come on, Pat, he's a top 20 player. And you're like, fine, he's QB 18. And that's probably what he is. He is, I'll get to some points about the offense itself in a minute, but I do think he is a guy who can hit some deep throws, but ultimately in Canada, yeah, in Toronto, potentially in Calgary, in British Columbia.
He needs to be in the higher elevation Western territories. I think he'd do really well there. The ball travel.
He'd be a great Banff Tiger. Banff doesn't have.
That's true. Exactly. This dude would absolutely dominate in the Canadian Rockies. Trevor Lawrence.
So I think Trevor Lawrence is fine. I don't think he's special, but the advanced numbers say he is maybe slightly above average starting NFL quarterback, and the Jags are 10th in EPA on dropbacks on first and second down. They're 21st on rushing on early downs. Despite that, per Hayden Wink's former coworker, they are dead last in neutral situation pass rate. What is going on here with Doug Peterson in this offense? I thought the whole point of adding these special deep threats is like, oh, we're becoming an explosive passing play offense. We're going to rip them with Trevor Lawrence, our future franchise quarterback. They're going to have Brian Thomas and Gabe Davis and Evan Ingram's hurt. Whatever. Anyway, no, they just want to play boring, let the defense beat us, run first football. And when you're not a special passing attack, like Mahomes could get away with that. Josh Allen, he's getting away with it right now. Trevor Lawrence isn't good enough to be like, oh, you get 28 pass attempts in a game, throw for 300 yards. He's not that good. So I think it's a lack of creativity, a lack of desire to put points on the board, and a lack of a superstar talent. I'm not going to call him anything close to a superstar that makes this a pray Brian Thomas comes down with not one, but he needs to come down with the second touchdown or we don't win type of offense, which is pretty disappointing.
Trevor Lawrence just crying out for a Shanahan or Kubiak grandson.
Oh my God.
Please.
He's going to be on this sort of Derek Carr trajectory where he kind of just languishes in his first team. He just cannot find a rhythm. Yeah. He has one good playoff game that happened versus the Chargers already, as Derek Carr, I believe, got hurt, but his team beat the Texans or something. Did they win that game?
No, they didn't at all.
They lost, but he was on an MVP caliber pace, but ultimately it turned out to be fraudulent. And then he languishes on his second team. And then they add one guy who's brushed shoulders with the Shanny once and he explodes. We're going to see that for Trevor Lawrence in 2027.
Say Carson Kubiak, Carson for some reason being spelled with a K. You cannot get to Jackson.
This is not a bit, to be clear. There is a Carson with a K Kubiak.
No, it's Clay. It's
Clay
Kubiak. Yeah. Carson
with a K.
Carson's, yeah, it is. Carson is
Wait,
not,
what?
Yeah, no, it's not a bit. Anyways, we're getting confused. Dalton Kincaid, Denny, crisis. What's the crisis level? What are the unfolding trends in this Bills skill core?
Bills are 31st in offensive snaps through week 2. They are 31st in pass attempts. Dalton Kincaid is 26th in tight end pass routes. He's tied with Cole Kmet and Gerald Everett in pass routes.
Nice.
That's just not enough volume. So it is over for Dalton Kincaid. I'm sorry to say.
For now, the Bills are going to get forced to throw. Man, Josh.
He also has a negative ADOT, I believe. And this is something we talked about in the summer where it's you do want your guy to be able to pile up PPR points, but the best tight ends in the NFL are the chain movers, the chunk gainers. It's the best at any position. That's why the NFL is struggling so mightily right now. So no one can get even a first down. No one can catch a pass beyond 10 yards. Kincaid not helping the NFL's efforts to put points on the board with his negative ADOT quote receptions.
Tank Bigsby, by the way, appears poised to play through his shoulder injury in Buffalo. We'll see if that matters, quote whatsoever. Down in the dumps after Tua Tagovailoa's scary week 2 injury, the Dolphins arrive in Seattle's 4-point underdogs. Denny Carter, I know you're panicking about Miami, which is why I will start with you off. Can't read anymore. So I'll start you off with the Seahawks, Denny, is what the paper says. What is the real Seahawks offense looking like right now? After they kind of struggled in week 1, then turned it on late, then kind of struggled in week 2, and then really turned it on without Kenneth Walker, a lot of pass attempts.
Yeah, just to reiterate, very happy with the Seahawks in week 2 because in week 1, folks, they were 12% below their expected.
You sold all your stock. You had a estate sale at your house. It's over.
You're right. I did sell the house. I sold my dog for some reason.
You sold low on that dog too. That's a very nice, beautiful, and costly dog. And Ziggy.
$45, guys. That's what I got. But they were 14% over their expected pass rate in week 2. So that's awesome. Look, even in week 1, they were over their expected dropback rate on first downs, which is important. They really didn't shift in that game against the Broncos. They didn't shift hard to the run until the second half. I'm thinking that the Broncos might just be a huge run funnel, and we're going to see that play out in the coming weeks.
There's another confounding variable is that Kenneth Walker did not play in week 2.
I know, but
Zach Charbonnet
is bad, I will say.
And 16 targets for JSN felt a whole lot like extension of the running game type usage.
Yeah, so maybe as long as Walker is out, they're just going to be super pass heavy.
Practicing yet? Yep.
I will say this game, as I'm preemptively disappointed in this game because I just don't think that Skylar Thompson and the Dolphins can push the Seahawks the way that Tua and the Dolphins would. So I think you're starting these guys, but just keep your expectations in check.
Speaking of the Dolphins, Kyle, just how freaked out are we if we have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle? Tyreek Hill is actually totally normal career splits with Skylar Thompson. So that's kind of the hope. Maybe the Mike McDaniel just schemes up, manufactures the looks for Tyreek, but is that a realistic hope or is that not happening again? And, Jalen Waddle, the secondary option, how bleak are things looking?
Yeah, it wasn't only Skylar Thompson in 2022. I believe it was a mix of Skylar Thompson and Teddy Bridgewater, who, for the life of me, I never remember where he's played football. No clue he played in Miami at any point. Apparently, he started like a whole season of football for the Denver Broncos. Also, don't remember that, if I'm being honest. But in 2022, both Tyreek and Jalen Waddle splits without Tua were pretty drastic. 21.5 PPR points for Waddle with Tua, or for Tyreek with Tua, and then 16 without, and then
that was
17.
because of a catastrophic lack of touchdowns. I'll say he averaged 6 catches for 75 yards with Skylar Thompson. I looked up the Rotoworld.
I was going to say, I think his pace without Skylar Thompson is like 100 yards.
He was catching the ball. They just were not scoring, which of course
I was going to say he also probably wasn't producing as many yards either, though, is the problem. Like, you can feed Tyreek touches, but whenever they're coming from a less talented quarterback, you're not going to be as efficient. I don't think you're benching either of these guys. I just think you're in kind of a tough spot where Tyreek weekly is a good contender to be the wide receiver 1 overall. Like, I'm betting on Justin Jefferson to outscore him in any given week that Justin Jefferson is playing with somehow Sam Darnold, who I think is good now, and Skylar Thompson, who I don't think is that good. So I wouldn't bet on him to outscore Amon-Ra. Assuming CD is healthy. CD didn't practice Wednesday. Assuming he's healthy, I wouldn't bet on him to outscore CD. He's more in that speculative chase. And when we were drafting, it was Puka and AJ Brown, neither of whom are available right now, but more in that Chase Ayuk boom bust wide receiver 1 than the clear good bet to be the wide receiver 1 overall.
See, the good news is if you're a Tyreek or Waddle manager is that it is at least a narrow target tree, Denny. Yes. Devin Achane is muscling in, though, could compete for those short area looks. Are we going to get some Jonnu Smith, who noted for his yards after catch ability, Denny? Will he maybe be a bigger factor in the Dolphins offense without Tua Tagovailoa?
I am so glad you asked me about Jonnu Smith because I looked powerfully into his usage in week 2, and I found the following. He ran a route on almost 100% of the Dolphins dropbacks until garbage time when Miami pulled most of their starters. He ran from the slot at a 60% rate on last Thursday night against the Bills. He was targeted on 26% of his routes against the Bills. So it seems like the Dolphins were like, after week 1, oh, yeah, right. We got this guy. This is a fast tight end. Maybe he can be our third pass catcher behind Waddle and Tyreek. So I think if you're kind of forecasting chasing game script, negative game script for the Dolphins here, I kind of think Jonnu looks kind of interesting.
I totally agree. It did not make sense that he was not used in week 1. It would not make sense to not take a short break. We will be right back after this. Dominate this NFL season with a Fantasy Life Plus subscription. Get weekly rankings, start-sit advice, DFS analysis, and betting tools. Use promo code SEASON20 for 20% off. Go to fantasylife.com/Rotoworld to learn more. The collapsing, even though it's only week 2, St. Louis Rams host the 49ers and their tens of thousands traveling fans as touchdown home underdogs. Kyle Dvorchak, who just dropped out of our podcast. So I'm not going to ask him what I was going to ask him. Denny, we're going to ask you about the other side of the ball, the San Francisco 49ers. Will we finally get a Brandon Ayuk breakout with Deebo Samuel joining Christian McCaffrey on the shelf?
I do want to point out that you said the St. Louis Rams as a political protest against.
Did I seriously just say the St. Louis Rams?
You did.
Oh my gosh! St. Louis. We would never let the 49ers fans take over our stadium. By the way, that's how you know that was not intentional. Yeah, that was maybe a silent political cry for help.
Yeah, it was. So, yeah, when you remove Debo from this Niners offense, you're removing 30% of the targets and 33% of the air yards. And that is quite the chunk. So what I would say is that Brandon Ayuk is now clearly a top 12 option at worst, honestly. And George Kittle is clearly a top 5 option at worst, going for the time being. I think that the Niners are going to really lean on Jordan Mason here. I could see him getting a lot of touches if game script goes well, because the Rams' rush defense is so bad, is unspeakably bad. And Shanahan is going to love to just tear into Sean McVay's team here.
He is, that this is going to be this is personal for Kyle.
It's Shanahan. A massacre waiting to happen.
And Sean McVay is going to be thinking about retirement again. Sean McVay texting his agent, "Do we still have that Amazon offer?"
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Herb Street should not be calling the pros anyway. This is ridiculous.
I mean, Matt Stafford and McVay might have a joint announcement after the game.
They might. Kyle's back, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Which Rams are still startable in 12-team redraft, Denny? The list is short.
Akers, for sure.
Well, Akers not on the Rams, of course. He's still on the Houston Texans. You mean Kyron Williams?
I'm sorry.
Akers is startable though.
I'm sorry. I don't know why I said that. That's weird.
I said St. Louis Rams. You said Akers. Guys, we know Rams facts.
Yeah,
Mark Bolger. He just needs a little more time, and he's going to get going this year.
I mean, you're starting Isaac Bruce in 12-team leagues. That's what I know.
Guys, Brian Quick had 108 air yards last week.
Yeah, you're starting Kyron. I think in deeper leagues, if you're really desperate at tight end, you can still mess around with Parkinson. Demarcus Robinson is the wide receiver 1 for better or worse. I would say for worse. So you know what you're doing there.
In the Fantasy Football Happy Hour Guillotine League, for the second week in a row, I failed to upgrade at tight end with David Njoku injured. So Colby Parkinson, if you're listening, do not do this to me. Again, I'll be deeply upset. The 0-2 Cincinnati Bengals are catching the unproven Commanders as touchdown plus home favorites, Denny Carter. What we saw from the Bengals in week 2 was better than what we saw in the opener, but was it actually encouraging, or was it just better compared to the awful that we got in week 1?
Yeah, it was a little better. Burrow pushed the ball down the field a little more. He also got the ball out more quickly. So that's a good combination. And look, the Commanders secondary is just Swiss cheese at this point. The Bengals can and probably will carve them up. Washington plays too high shell at the 10th highest rate. And by the way, is the 4th worst in that coverage, right? So they play a lot of too high and they get burned in too high. So that's something to remember about all the pass catchers in the Bengals offense. And also Washington is allowing the 9th highest completion rate over expected. They're just so I think Chase obviously is starting. Yoshivas.
Is this on the main slate for DFS? This feels like a little nice buy low spot.
Unfortunately, it is not. It's a Monday night, but we're gonna have a double header, 2-game slate on Monday night though.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair because the 2 games on the the holidays or the rare Monday nights are actually kind of fun.
Can you remind me if we're talking about Gesicki? Can I mention him real quick?
He ran half the routes, but he's seeing a ton of targets. It's very scammy, but Denny, you do like yourself a scam, so go ahead.
I like myself some routes too, and he's not running. I just wanted to mention that for the folks who saw his box score from last week and oh, hey, I gotta start him over Kelsey. You don't do that.
You do have to maybe start him over Colby Parkinson. Really, really, really rough in that range of the board. Kyle, Brian Robinson quietly balling ?
Yeah, I mean he's as I expected, he's crushing the advanced efficiency metrics in his rookie season, in which I remind you, he was shot, I think it was roughly in the butt, but in his thigh, in his leg, somewhere around his butt. He was not particularly efficient. As the season went on, he got more efficient. Last year, as much as we sort of credit him or demean him for being this boring running back, he was also really good in the efficiency.
Oh dear. Kyle has got to stop exploring derelict space stations. His signal is cutting out from the USS Romulus. Kyle is back now. He's very confused what I'm talking about. But Kyle, your internet connection is a little shaky. Brian Robinson, a flex. Denny, where are we at with Jaden Daniels in this Commanders passing game? Is it a little better than we maybe made it sound on Galaxy Brains?
No, it's not. It's not. No. Jaden Daniels, like I mentioned, he's rushing on roughly 36% of his dropbacks. That's awesome. Like for fantasy, it's just crazy. It gives him an insane floor every week. They're running cold in the red zone. I think that might be a function of Jaden Daniels just being a really bad passer right now. But I seriously think you just can't start Terry McLaurin. You just can't. Okay, until we see something different in this offense. Zach Ertz looks like the number one receiver in this offense.
2-game sample size season, man. I'm not benching Terry just yet. Jaden has shown enough it factor, the very quantifiable it factor, that I think he's going to figure this out, and he's going to get Terry McLaurin the ball. All right. Terry will be scary again, Denny. And we're not talking about like derelict space station scary. We're talking about like cool scary. All right?
We got to stop with the scary Terry thing. I don't even understand it.
It's because it's rhymes.
He's just another overrated Ohio State receiver.
We're so bad at nicknames now. We have a nickname crisis in this modern American country. We need to do better. The Panthers needed to do better at quarterback, Kyle, and they are doing that. The quarterback changing Panthers arrive in Las Vegas, Nevada, as sizable underdogs. People are acting like the move to Andy Dalton is life changing, but this is a quarterback who has a 6.8 YPA since 2017. What is realistic in terms of Panthers passing game improvement? It is Dave Canales. He's done this before. What can we expect, Kyle?
Yeah, Dalton's not going to set the world on fire, but even with a not special, a below average 6.7 YPA, that's roughly a 25% upgrade upon what they've gotten in Bryce Young's career. And 25%, not only just in terms of the average yards you're getting, but that also in itself gives you more pass attempts going forward, because gaining more yards and not getting 3 and outs gets you more plays. It also, as we saw with like Mike White versus Zach Wilson, Mike White's not a particularly good quarterback. As soon as your team goes from Zach Wilson to Mike White, your team's like, let's throw 40 times a game. This is incredible. I love this. And we're not going to see that with the Panthers, but they're going to throw more, because when you have Bryce Young, you make the strategic decision to throw the ball less often, let alone the fact that you struggle to throw the ball because you can't sustain drives. So he is not only more efficient, but that efficiency begets more volume, both in terms of like you just get to play more football, but also your coach trusts you more. And although the YPA isn't special, over the past 2 years plus 2 games, Dalton ranks a perfectly mediocre 22nd in EPA per play and 24th in completion percent over expected. Bryce Young is 39th and 37th in those 2 stats. I believe that's second to last and third to last. He just, as much as Dalton's not special, Bryce was a complete disaster, and moving from complete disaster to a little below average probably is going to do a lot for the guys like Deontay Johnson specifically, but maybe Xavier Legette too.
I'll just say with Deontay Johnson, for people who are like celebrating, like, finally, man, we have to remember even the good old days with Deontay Johnson, like he averaged like 10 yards a catch. Like it's still not exactly like, it's not like we're reverting to like Hall of Fame level Deontay Johnson.
No, but I think he instantly becomes a PPR top 30 guy, honestly.
That's a best case scenario. 30 to 32 feels top 30 is not outlandish.
Look, Andy Dalton is a real NFL quarterback. That you cannot say that about Bryce.
I actually listen, I don't know about 36, 37-year-old Andy Dalton, man. As you know, I think he fits my archetype of backup who's going to instantly get hurt. And we're just going to see what happens with this situation.
That would suck.
That would suck. That would be bad. But I'm not basically holding any Andy Dalton balloon parties quite yet. What are we talking about next here? Where are we? Denny Carter. He works for this website. He's on this show. How real was what we saw from the Raiders in week 2, it being feeding both Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers?
The Raiders want to run, but they have the worst running back room in the NFL.
I was told running backs don't matter, though.
And Zamir White. Well, when I guess at a certain point they do, because wow,
they matter when they're really good or really bad, Denny.
So they're 7% above their expected drop back rate through 2 games. When Minshew drops back, unlike when mobile quarterbacks drop back, it is actually a pass or, of course, a sack. But what I'm saying is that this is meaningful in that there are lots of passes to be distributed here, primarily to Bowers and to Adams. The team has used Brock Bowers in creative ways. Last week, Bowers had 15 snaps at tight end, so in line, 6 snaps at outside receiver, and then 20 snaps in the slot. They seem to have completely made me look like a fool when I said that the Raiders would have no idea how to use him. They know how to use him, and Minshew seems to really trust him. So, I think he has a clear runway to tight end 1 overall, which means, of course, that the bank examiner will be taking everything I have.
Denny and I were reminiscing on the phone the other day about Pat Crane, I believe, came on the show and made a personal plea with Denny and I to take Brock Bowers more serious. I believe quite literally said it's not too late.
He said it's not too you guys don't have to do this. And we said we're gonna do it even harder. We're gonna fade Brock Bowers even harder now.
Didn't yet just what was the old classic drill tweet? Keep yelling, be quiet at me. It will only make our opinions worse.
Yeah. Oh man, my
Something
opinion
like
on
that.
Bowers got so much worse after Crane got on the show.
That was I believe that was the word for word, the drill tweet, Kyle. Chuba Hubbard no longer dead, by the way, or do we even care? Guys losing snaps to Miles Sanders. I mean, yikes.
I think everybody gets a boost here, including Hubbard.
He's losing snaps to Miles Sanders.
To Denny's point, everyone gets a boost, and to Pat's point, he's losing snaps to Miles Sanders. It got better in week 1. It was a 6-5 carry split in 1 carry in favor of Chuba Hubbard. Last week it was 10-7 though. Like it improved, but it didn't improve in a way that's like, did it get to the point we need it to get to? I'll be honest, like I said earlier, I'm desperate for running back in some leagues, but I think it is at most a bit generous to Chuba Hubbard to rank him inside the top 36 running backs. Maybe you can squeeze him in there, Pat. You're doing the rankings.
I did squeeze him in the top 36 this week because it's kind of bleak, as you know.
It is bleak,
So.
But that doesn't say a lot. That is telling us a bit more about the running back 25 through 37 than it is about Chuba Hubbard, who, as I pointed out, Andy Dalton is maybe a below average starting NFL quarterback, and we're getting maybe 1A levels of work from Chuba Hubbard. That's not a recipe for success. That's a recipe for, I hope my wide receivers win my matchup and he doesn't lose my matchup outright.
Sometimes I use the phrase, the little fantasy game that could. Steelers, Chargers is kind of the little fantasy game that couldn't, or 2 teams that are both 2-0, but the bookmakers have installed a 35.5 game total. Very understandably so. The Steelers somehow, I would argue questionably, 1-point home favorites, Denny Carter. The Chargers offense has been everything we feared and more, extremely effective in real life for the purposes, at least of what Jim Harbaugh wants to do. Not really translating to fantasy other than long J.K. Dobbins runs. What is the state of the Chargers beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, you're starting Dobbins, hoping that he can keep running hot because he is running super hot. And by that, I mean way over expected in every metric. So, hopefully that keeps up. The Steelers' rush defense is good, so I don't know if that will actually keep up. Quentin Johnston is clearly the wide receiver 1 right now. Pat's theory that Jim Harbaugh saw him play well once and said, "This is my guy." That it actually
took the job.
I mean, Jim Harbaugh told The Athletic this week. He said, "Look, I went to Quentin Johnston. I know what you can do. Okay, go out and do it." And so he has lifted this guy up, emotionally, like morale wise, and he's cooking right now.
He is cooking right. Jim, that's just honestly one of the things that makes Jim Harbaugh so special. And like, does not he just the small. No one does the little things better than Jim Harbaugh. I'm gushing like a 1982 newspaper columnist, but man, Jim Harbaugh has some very ineffable qualities. And guess what? Guess what doesn't score fantasy points? Ineffable qualities.
No, you're right.
Kyle, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Talk about Arthur Smith.
Oh.
Yep, living up to expectations, living down to expectations. What is the state of the Steelers offense?
I'll say, I mean, like you said, it's what we expected. They are the second most run-heavy team in terms of pass rate over expected, and that trails only the Packers, who had a Malik Willis game. I don't really think that's like hardly a representative sample, whereas, yeah, this is what we expected from Art. So I think we can rely on this going forward. I will say, to somewhat Arthur Smith's credit, and I'll say even more so to Justin Fields' credit, he's got a plus 6% pass rate over expected. He was right around neutral last year. His sack rate is down nearly 4% versus his career sack rate. No interceptions on 0 turnover-worthy plays. Admittedly, that also comes on a career low ADOT. He's not slinging it as much as he did in Chicago, but that honestly is maybe for the best. And on the flip side of that coin, when he does sling it, it's George Pickens. And George Pickens has lost just shy of 100 yards due to penalties. He has had a bunch of long plays called back there were penalties in the offense. Obviously, that's how they get called back. But they are just peppering this guy with, as we pointed out at going into the season, 50% of the team's air yards. He remains probably the best bet to lead the NFL in a very sort of dumb niche stat we've created is air yard share.
Some would say it doesn't translate at all. You cannot feed your family with air yards.
Yep, exactly. Ask the Drake Londons and Kyle Pittses of yesteryear and maybe this year too.
Chris Olave.
Yeah, exactly. Ask these guys how I get all the percentage of the air yards, how that goes. It's not the most fun experience. But like I said, Pickens genuinely has just run bad on dumb stuff like losing big chunk gains to penalties that were mostly unrelated to the play anyways. I think we'll get some big games from him. When? I don't know. He's like the Calvin Johnson of Gabe Davis's.
There we go. It's hard to follow it up, but I will by talking about our final game of the week, the Denver Broncos at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's some midweek betting activities, got the total over 40, at least in this game, Kyle. Denny and I talk about this a lot on Galaxy Brains about Sean Payton's looking very powerfully into the state of the Broncos and who drafted Bo Nix, who has been calling these plays. We're going to find out what's going on here. We do not know. Kyle, what do you know about the state of the Broncos offense?
Not good. It is not good. I mean, I don't even know if it's to their credit, honestly, but we are seeing them not have the lowest ADOT. It's that when they throw it beyond 5 yards downfield, they're not good at it. They're simply
somehow literal dumpster fire starts on the sideline. Like, why is there a dumpster in the stadium? Like this guy has to smell. The aesthetics of this are atrocious. Get this off the field.
I mean, that's also describes the on-the-field product, unfortunately. Get this off the field because they're not completely giving up on throwing deep. It's that when they do it, they're terrible at it. Bo Nix is 25th in the NFL in both deep throw passing grade and completion rate. In intermediate throws, he is 33rd, which is last in both of those categories as well. He's actually been fine on throws short of 10 yards and throws behind the line of scrimmage. That doesn't get you very far. Everyone can throw behind the line of scrimmage particularly well. Maybe he's the best at it. Does that mean much? And they're throwing at the 20th highest rate on intermediate throws and the 16th highest rate at deep throws, which is to say they're a short passing game, but they're not completely giving up on the deep ball. It's just that they physically cannot accomplish that feat. And that was the qualm with Bo Nix coming out of college, and now we're seeing it play out pretty much bar for bar. So do I think they can turn it around? I don't know if he'll be the worst quarterback in the NFL on intermediate throws and very, very, very bad on deep throws. But do I think he's an average quarterback at those things? I mean, I've watched him. I don't think so.
Denny, take us home talking about Chris Godwin's Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah. So should have listened, but the Bucs were like, hey, we're going to move Godwin back to the slot almost exclusively. And they did, and now he is just cooking the league alive. So congratulations to me, who did not draft Chris Godwin at all. So, I mean, Chris Godwin, probably a better play than Mike Evans right now, especially because Evans is, going to face the Broncos' top cornerback and Patrick Surtain. I mean, you're starting both of those guys, but I feel much, much better about Godwin and the type of targets he's getting. I will say Rachaad White was banged up, groin issue. I think he's practicing in a limited capacity.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on that. Bucky Irving would be something close to what the kids call a smash play if Rachaad White is out.
Especially for my dynasty team where Christian McCaffrey, I will one day forgive you. But for now, I'm starting Ty Chandler over Bucky Irving.
Oof.
For now, I'm ending this show. Really, really good stuff, breaking down the entire week 3 weekend slate. Really, really good stuff. This is all over the website. You have the stat for each team from Kyle Dvorchak. You have waivers, which still has some actionable information, even if waivers have already run in your league. Not even, they already have. Kyle's also going to have start him, sit him on Friday. Then he has the regression files, is the funnel report. I have my rankings. I'm updating between now and Sunday morning. We've got so much podcast material for you. We've got Galaxy Brains for you. We take a very strong look at the state of the rookie quarterback.
Powerful.
Power. It's gripping stuff, I will say. So for Kyle Dvorchak, for Denny Carter, I'm Patrick Daugherty. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with you later this weekend.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Rotoworld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.